Well, how are you, ladies and gentlemen? Okay. Well, I would like to go back to this problem of the investigation of chemical weapons used in Syria and basically make 3 points, all three of them of some length. First, I thought yesterday the spokesman of the State Department of the United States made a statement which is interesting enough to comment on about this problem, and I quote, "Russia is currently blocking an effort by the Security Council to allow UN access into Syria to investigate any and all credible allegations," end of quote. I'll single out 3 elements in that statement. Well, of course, the notion that Russia is blocking anything is completely misleading, because from the outset, immediately after the Syrian government invited the United Nations to investigate the use of chemical weapons on March 19, we have been doing everything we could in order to make sure that that investigation were to happen. And it was not through the fault of ours that the Syrian government was presented by the formulas for that investigation, Iraq time formulas, which of course it was impossible to accept. Moreover, we did play a role, of course, in having the recent understanding about the visit to Damascus of Mr. Thurstrom and Ms. Kane. So again, our role in that also does indicate, I believe, that we are in favor of a proper investigation. Now, the second element of the statement about the Security Council allowing UN access. It's not for the Security Council to allow access. It's for the Syrian government to agree on that with the Secretariat. And this is exactly what they've been trying to achieve, having in the first place invited the UN inspectors, chemical weapons inspectors to Syria way back in March. One, I think, important element of a positive nature is a reference to credible allegations. Indeed, we need to be looking to credible allegations. Unfortunately, I think what our Western colleagues have been doing is trying to produce the maximum number of allegations with minimum credibility in an effort, one might think, to create maximum problems for arranging such investigation. Now, coming back, my second element of my remarks, what has been happening in the Security Council. Last week, our British colleague, Ambassador Lyle Grant, invited P5 perm reps for a conversation on a draft resolution. From the outset of that discussion, our European colleagues told us that they wanted the whole procedure to be absolutely confidential, because they said they didn't want to create any new frictions in the Security Council. Unfortunately, experience shows that whenever they say that, as soon as they leave the room, they try to talk to the first journalist they can get hold of. This is exactly what has happened this time. But substantively, what we, meaning me and my Chinese colleague, Ambassador Li Baodun, who entirely shared my position, and I shared his position throughout this discussion, so it's also wrong to describe Russia as the sole voice in this conversation, was an intention to put the language of the G8 statement on Syria, on the chemical weapons investigation on Syria, in the form of resolution. Ambassador Li Baodun and I have permission of Ambassador Li Baodun to refer to him in this. Usually I try not to refer to other colleagues' positions. What we pointed out was that, well, first of all, a declaration of the G8 is an important political document, of course, but it is not necessarily meant to be put in the form of a resolution. Secondly, the text of that section of the G8 statement is clear that what G8 meant was that first there should be an investigation, and then the results of the investigation should go to the Security Council for its assessment. But you know how our British friends are. They even drive on the wrong side of the road, so they try to put the cart before the horse once again. And we thought that it was completely unreasonable and contrary to the G8 declaration that we're referring to. And finally, we said that we thought that some important progress was being made in the contacts between the Syrian government and the Secretariat, so we need to allow that progress to materialize and for that investigation to take place. So I'm really sorry that they went down the road of trying to publicize it as much as possible. In fact, on the basis of what we have seen before, we tend to come to the conclusion that the intention was to, again, to make as much noise as possible instead of trying to help organize those investigations. For instance, we learned that their ambassadors in The Hague at the Chemical Weapons Organization were already sort of brandishing the text of this draft resolution of the Security Council in the corridors. You know, if you're serious about things, you don't do things like that. So unfortunately, we take it as a part of a propaganda campaign, which is not aimed at making the task of arranging that investigation easier. And third, you asked me last time when we talked the day before yesterday, I think you asked me whether we're going to share that analysis we produced and we gave to the Secretary General of the United Nations, which in our view conclusively shows that the March 19 use of chemical weapons was in fact a use of chemical weapons by the opposition, because both the chemical and the projectile were homemade and not industrially produced as you would expect if it were done by the government. So we did send that report to our P5 colleagues, and I was surprised to hear that even before looking, I think, before having a chance to look at that very serious and substantive 80 pages long investigation analysis, one can read quotes and remarks by a senior Western diplomat, senior Western envoy, repeating this naive story they came up from the outset after March 19, that it was the government itself who was shooting but missed the target and killed its own people. Of course, if you were to take the time to read our analysis, it's absolutely clear that both the projectile and the chemical were produced in a way which rules it out that they were something which was a result of the production by the Syrian government. In fact, we even indicated, you will recall, who most likely was behind this projectile production and roughly when it was produced, on the territory of Syria, incidentally. So these are my remarks. I hope now things are a little bit clearer to you. If you have a couple of questions, I would try to answer them, please.
Is not the bottom line here that the UN team be allowed to visit all the sites that you, the British, the French, the Americans have said?
You know, I don't want to jump to any conclusions now, because I think, and again, I think it's an important sort of admission by the spokesman of the U.S. State Department that those need to be credible allegations. If that Swiss newspaper report I alluded to last time is accurate, saying that the French samples, for instance, are 1,000 times below the level of this well-known Zarin attack in 1995 and could well be produced by insecticides, you know. But it's not for me. It's not for me to come to that. As I was frank with you last time, I'm frank with you today. I'm not privy to all those technical things. They are to be discussed between the Syrian government and the Secretariat. But some of the elements of the positions which we see in our Western colleagues' statements and actions, on the one hand, they say, well, we only have a limited number of cases we want to be investigated in addition to March 19, but at the same time they keep talking about everything and all, and most importantly, I think it's obvious, especially now after this announcement of the visit of the two senior UN representatives to Damascus to discuss the modalities of that investigation. It's not really, it makes no sense, if you are interested in good results, to create this kind of a small propaganda storm in a glass of water.
Mr. Ambassador, one follow-up on that. The Secretary General specifically thought that there was at least one other credible allegation in Homs that he asked to be investigated.
Well, first of all, I don't recall, frankly, I think it's not a very accurate, I don't recall this particular statement from the Secretary General. But again, This is a subject, we don't know what Mr. Salstrom brought to the Secretary General yesterday. We'll see what he's going to bring to Damascus. The whole process started by the invitation of the Syrian government to investigate March 19. This one has to, and then after they invited the Syrian government, all of a sudden our European colleagues jumped up and said, what about Homs back in December? Of course, if they had credible allegations about Homs back in December, they could have raised this issue in December. So we did see, continue to see what they did at that time as a diversion thing on their part. Marcia, I'm sorry, please, no, if you follow up.
I was going to ask you what you would like to have the United States government do. Should the State Department, would you like them to take?
No, I don't want to take, I don't want to make any recommendations to the State Department. Don't rub Russia the wrong way, you know, this is my...
Thanks a lot. I have two questions. One is, given that Kano also happened in March, what do you think can really be accomplished if they were to visit it physically? Is it too much time gone? And also wanted to ask Carla Del Ponte, one of the three panelists, she had said that there were strong suspicions of rebel use, and we haven't really heard from her. So it's kind of strange. She didn't come here.
Well,
what do you,
I think Carla Del Ponte, why we haven't heard from her, it's not a question which I can answer, but she has been very clear that she has very solid reasons to believe that it has been the armed opposition groups which have been using chemical weapons.
But one, to follow up on what Matthew asked, has too much time elapsed by now? I mean, you were talking about samples that apparently were collected at the time in the Russian analysis and others. Also, I need to ask you, although it's a different topic, about Snowden. Is there any?
Nothing. It's not my subject at all. Not too much time. Of course, I suppose the sooner it had happened, the better it would have been. It would have been for the investigators. But since the investigators continue to persevere, I suppose technically and scientifically, this time and age, one can still, produce results and do a credible investigation. Please, you want the last question?
So it seems pretty probable that a mass industrial produced chemical weapon would rule out the opposition, but it doesn't exactly follow that a small scale cottage production, as you had described it, rules out the government as well. Isn't it rather an unscientific conclusion to say, without having found the facilities or having found the suspect, to conclude?
No, well, first of all, we indicated that we do have information who actually produced this kind of a projectile and when they started that production in February of this year. But of course, I mean, you can have all sorts of fantastic scenarios, but for the government it makes no sense at all to produce poor quality projectile and poor quality chemical and try to use it. It does not make sense at all.
Just one follow-up, Ambassador, on the sharing question. You said you'd share and you have. Have you gotten any responses from any of the...
No, except as I mentioned, to my surprise, a repetition of this bizarre scenario of 3 months ago, which we think is completely refuted by our analysis. But I suppose it will take some time for them to analyze our analysis. And as we said, if they have some additional questions, our experts will be prepared to answer.
The question that I asked last time, doesn't your analysis indicate that Syria does have industrially produced?
No, our analysis does not indicate that at all, because what we encountered was not industrially produced chemical agent and not industrially produced projectile. So it doesn't...
Therefore, you say that it wasn't the government,
yes.
assuming that
Yes.
the government would have...
No, if you assume, that the government would have it, it would be clearly not something which you assume they would have, because it was something which was produced by somebody who is trying his hand under conditions which are less than industrial conditions. I'm sorry? I'm sorry, what's...
In order to evade suspicion.
To evade suspicion. Well, as I say, I'm afraid this kind of a road of fantastic scenarios may be something which some people would want to go down after this investigation, but I think we should keep keep our reasoning within the limits of what is more or less rational, even under the current circumstances.
Does it have any impact at all on the Russian-U.S. effort to get Geneva II?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. It's, I think our Geneva II effort is too important. I think both countries attach a lot of importance to that effort. We have had some new developments lately. We have had the new leadership of the National Coalition. We are somewhat upset by the statements the new leadership was coming up with after it was elected. We were hoping that there would be more pro-Geneva II. But we are prepared to work with the new leadership of the national coalition, as we have been working with all opposition groups. We think that one of the, I mean, maybe the main missing link now in terms of Geneva II is rallying the main opposition groups around the platform of the Geneva Communique of June 30, 2012. That element is still missing, and the United States is telling us that they're working on the opposition, and we are trying to do our best in our contacts with various opposition groups as well.
Do you have any evidence that Carla Del Ponte knew what she was talking about, since she often shoots from the hip? Because the commission she was with seemed to say there was no conclusive evidence. Do you know anything more aside from...
No, I don't. No, I don't. I suppose she has some good reason to make the statement she is making. She's not... Thank you very much.